Good morning. Our guest on this edition of Point of View is half of the team responsible for all of this and much more.
Get set, get ready, here comes Up and Ready.
Huckleberry, how?
Yogi's very smarter than the average bear. Yippee-yi-yo, hey-hey-hey, elephant all the way. Here comes Big Roll and Roll. Eight the big scout. One banana, two banana, three banana, four.
This time out on Point of View, we are honored to welcome a man who's earned a place in the pantheon of animation gods. It's Joe Barbera, as in Hanna-Barbera. Mr. Barbera, 86 years old, joined the industry almost 60 years ago and has transformed it immeasurably since then. Welcome to Point of View. Thank you, and it's a great honor to meet you.
Well, listen, thank you for inviting me.
I want to hear your life story, and this isn't known commonly, I think, by people outside the animation industry. You started your professional life as a banker.
Well, let's say you can call it that. It was a disaster because I can't add, and I got a job in a bank, and I did so badly that they promoted me, and I became an income tax man, if you can believe that. We used to file income tax returns every year, and I think our economic problems, wherever we have them, are due to those returns that I file. I tell you, it was a mess.
How did you make that jump, or how did it come to you?
Well, what happened was I was so unhappy in the bank that I used to do cartoons at night. I found out I could draw. I would draw cartoons at nighttime and try to sell them once a week. I'd go up to Park Avenue, and I'd go into Red Book, Collier's, Saturday Evening Post, and eventually I sold some. In the meantime, the bank then caught up with me and said goodbye, and I stepped out on Broadway, and I felt like a new man. And I was going to move to Greenwich Village and starve, which all artists were doing at that time. And I ran into a fraternity brother, and he said, "Go across the street. They're starting a cartoon department over there. Tell them you're an animator." I didn't even know what that was. But I had magazines under my arm with artwork, and I went in there and I said, "I am an animator." So they took the magazines, and they came back, and they gave me a job. And that's how I started.
And then your career progressed from there. Now, you're still in New York at this point, right?
I beg your pardon?
You're still in New York at this point.
Oh, yeah. I'm in New York, and I'm in the studio. And that studio then folded.
Which studio was that?
This was called Van Buren. And they were doing the Frank Buck pictures and the Charlie Chaplin shorts and whatever they were doing. So when they went under, I went up to Terry Tunes, which is in New Rochelle, and tried to get a job there. And I was about to leave for New York. Now can I go back for 1 second?
Please. We want it all.
When I saw the Disney cartoon, and he was just starting himself, and it was called The Skeleton Dance. And I looked at it, and I was so impressed, I wrote my one and only fan letter and said I would like to work for you, and I drew a sketch of Mickey Mouse. And lo and behold, I get an answer. "Coming to New York, and we'll call you sign Walt Disney." Well, now, strange to say, that was the greatest break I ever got, was that he never called me. Because if he had called me and said, "Hello, kid, go on out to the coast and we'll give you a shot," he didn't do that. He never showed up. But if he had, there'd have been no Tom and Jerry, no Flintstone, no nothing. I would have disappeared into the factory, and I would have been gone. But that's how it started.
Okay, and so you were still in New York at this point. You didn't meet Disney. You made it eventually to the West Coast. How did that happen?
Well, what happened was I was at Terry Tunes in New Rochelle, and he was doing Mighty Mouse. And I was contacted by a scout, came out from the coast, trying to hire talent to bring to MGM to start a cartoon department there. And I was one of them. About 8 of us came out from New York to California. And Bill Hanna, my partner-to-be, was there already. And that's how the thing began to work together, meld,
And Tom and Jerry?
Well, what happened was that studio at MGM was in bad. It was going down the drain, too. I thought, this is the third one that I closed so far, And While we were sitting there, I said to Bill one day, I said, why don't we do a cartoon of our own? And we picked a cat and a mouse, which everybody said, what an unoriginal idea that is. It's been done and done and done, you know. But the cat and mouse is what I wanted to do, because I know that when you see a cat and mouse, half the picture is done because it's going to be chased. You know that. And I think we approached with a different style, and we sat there and we put together a cartoon, which everybody figured was going to be a disaster. And it went on to get nominated for the Academy Award, the very first one we ever did. The next one oh, by the way, in the meantime, the MGM executive came down and said to us, don't make any more. This is the kind of stuff you run into. He said, we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. He used to lisp a little bit like that, you know. And so what happens is that we kept the eggs in the basket, and suddenly a letter came from a big exhibitor who said, when are we going to see another one of the delightful cat and mouse characters? So that's when we started, and we called it Tom and Jerry. And we went on to win, as you know, 7 Oscars. Now, do you want to know the topper of that whole story?
Yes.
We put in 20 years at MGM, working day and night and developing this great money-making machine, which it was, and our reward was a phone call. It said, close the studio. So that wasn't our fault. The main office, the MGM studio, was in financial trouble.
What year was this?
That would have been about 1957.
Yeah.
And what happened was is they found out that by reissuing our old cartoons, they could make almost as much money as new ones. So the giant brains said, ha-ha, do not make any more new ones. We will save some money. And they dismantled the greatest machine that we had. It was our studio. It was perfect. Now, that again that sad news was a good break.
Hang on. I want to explain that after I tell our audience that you're listening to Point of View on WNUA 95.5. Our guest is animator Joe Barbera, the co-founder with William Hanna of Hanna-Barbera Studios, a legend in the animation business. Okay, 1957, MGM shuts the studio down.
That's right. So what we do is we go around hat in hand trying to get a job. You know, we thought we were at the top of the heap. And I remember watching my kids play Little League ball and laughing and chasing, and I said, uh-oh, poor kids are going to be starving in the next 2 weeks, you know. So wherever we went, they said, no, we can't afford you guys. Things are really bad. All the cartoon studios were closed. So we finally made a contact at Columbia, and we created 2 characters, which I created at home. My daughter put color on the drawings. We went in to see Screen Gems at Columbia, and they decided to take a chance on us. Now, if you need a money measure, we were getting $45,000 for a 5-minute Tom and Jerry cartoon.
$45,000 to produce one cartoon.
A 5-minute, up to $65,000. Going into the studio there, and considering the fact that there were no cartoon studios working, and they couldn't afford money because television didn't have the money. It was a low-paying outfit. They offered us $2,800 for a 5-minute cartoon.
Well, just under $3,000.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
And then we started to do that. We had a pencil test. You know what a pencil test is? It's the first look at a cartoon just in pencil. And we got a call and said that Harry Cohen wanted to know what we were doing. He was the head of Columbia. He had a frightening reputation, you know. He was a killer. So we met in a little projection room, and he showed up, didn't say anything, sat down, and we put this pencil test on of Rough and Ready. And if you don't understand it, just pencil lines swiggling around. So the lights went on, he got up and walked out. With our agent was with him. Didn't say a word. So I called the agent. I said, what did he say? He said, do you want to know what he said? I said, yeah. He said, get rid of them. This was it.
Now, is he talking about the characters?
Yeah, get rid of us, and the whole works, forget it. Now, I think God stepped in there because NBC was doing a children's show, and they wanted this 5-minute piece to just drop into their show. So that kept us going.
That was your first step into television, was with Rough and Ready.
Get set, get ready, here comes Rough and Ready. They're tough but steady, always rough and ready. They sometimes have their little spats, even fight like dogs and cats, but when they need each other, that's when they're rough and ready.
Yeah, one other thing, we moved into the Charlie Chaplin studio, which was full of memories for me because I love Charlie Chaplin and what he did and his timing. And here we were sitting right where he used to operate out of, on La Brea Boulevard.
Well, that puts you in the forefront of the movement of the animation industry from the silver screen to the little screen, the black and white TV screen.
We revived the whole industry.
Yeah, and did you at that point see that was the way the business was going to go in the late 50s and early 60s?
Well, at that time it had to go that way because of money. I mean, the structure was that there wasn't that kind of money, so what do you do to stay alive? So we created a new system of what we call limited animation, which means, let's say, instead of 1,000 drawings, you do it in 100 drawings. This is what we had to do.
And your studio took a lot of criticism over the years for adopting that and promoting that and making it sort of the standard for animation over the years.
The criticism was only from people that didn't know what we were doing. They didn't know, number one, you didn't have the money. You didn't know that we had to create a new way of keeping alive. We revived the entire business. We hired back our entire studio, came back to work for us. And a quick summary of what happened was that the very first sale that we made, by the way, was here in Chicago. Chicago is what kept us going. With the Kellogg's people and the Leo Burnett Agency, they're the ones that encouraged us to do the first show, which was Huckleberry Hound.
The biggest show in town is Huckleberry Hound for all you guys and gals. The biggest clown in town is Huckleberry Hound with all his cartoon pals. It's Huckleberry fun, it's for everyone. So come on, gather round. Get yourself all set, clean up your TV set for Huckleberry Hound. That oh so merry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Hound.
By the way, we're getting a lot of these great theme songs from a site on the World Wide Web that is devoted to honoring animation, in particular the works of our guest, Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Studios. And if you'd like some information on where to find some of this material on the World Wide Web, you can email us at WNUAnews@AOL.com. This is Point of View on WNUA, and Joe Barbera, let's hear more of the story. So Huckleberry Hound made it on the airwaves, and that, was it syndicated? Was it?
Well, I'll tell you what it was. We used to call it the Kellogg Network. If Kellogg liked a show, they would go out and sell it all over the country. And they were able to, the first show they bought, see what happened was I came into Chicago in the middle of the winter, freezing to death. I'll never forget those days. And I had with me two pencil reels, one on Yogi Bear and one on the cat that hated Mises to pieces. You remember that character?
Snagglepuss.
No. He hated Mises, Pixie and Dixie.
Pixie and Dixie, but who was the cat?
The cat we called Jinx at that time.
Oh, that's right, Jinx the cat. Okay.
So I brought in two reels, and all of the head men at the agency were sitting waiting. And when I got in there, we had a couple of experts that said, now don't worry about it, give us the film, give us the separate track. When you want to start it, press the button, we'll get everything rolling. The button was under the table. So in came all of these people, all of these very tough agency people. And I was sitting there and I pressed the button, and the picture came on with the wrong track, naturally. What else has ever happened? So there was a lot of mumbling, and I had to try to cover. Then we played it, and when we got through, and I went back to the hotel, I got a call that said, you sold the show. So Huckleberry Hound was sold, and away we went. And in the show was Yogi Bear. that got his own show.
He has a feathers and a millionaire. That's because he's smarter than the average bear.
After that, we had Quick Draw McGraw. He got his own show.
Yippee-yi-yo, yellow all the way. Here comes Quick Draw McGraw. Kellogg's.
After that, we moved on to the Flintstones. Now I can keep going, you know.
Keep going. Now Flintstones was a substantive change in approach for you guys,
Well,
right? I mean, the other shows up until that point, they had largely been sold through Kellogg's, right?
That is
syndicated, not on any of the big networks
That is
necessarily. Flintstones was the turning point.
Well, our salesman come in and said, "Why can't we do a show for prime time?" Which, of course, nobody ever heard of that. I mean, cartoons, prime time. And we tried to put together a family, which was the hot thing at the time. We tried a Pilgrim family, a Hillbilly family, a Roman family. And it wasn't until we got to the Stone Age that it fell into place. Because then we had the Polaroid camera, the Stoneway piano. We had Ann Mogrock as a guest. We had Stoney Curtis as a guest. And it all began to fit. And we went away on that. We started on that. And I had to come into New York to try to sell it, which took 8 weeks. 8 weeks of sitting in a hotel and every day sallying forth to try to sell it to somebody, or jump on a plane and come here to Chicago and try to sell it to the Foot Conan building.
Yeah. Advertisers.
Or we'd go down to Texas and try to sell in Midland somewhere with the Saran Wrap people, and et cetera. So after 8 weeks in New York, in which by a certain time I began to smell like the hotel. You know what a hotel is? It has all the cleaning fluids that gets in your clothes.
Yeah.
It was handy because if you ran into anybody on the street, you say, "Sniff, sniff." "Oh, you're staying at the Plaza," you know. And I'm staying sniff, sniff at the Netherlands, you know. And it went on like that. On the very last day, after 8 weeks, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the ABC executives came into the hotel and bought the show in 15 minutes.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. They're a modern Stone family. Hello, Fred and Wilma. They're a couple just like you and me.
Now, if they hadn't, I was on the way home, all the artwork would have gone into the file, and there'd be no show, because you never go back the second year with the same show. That's how close you are to zero, you know.
Now, the Flintstones was a groundbreaker, and it paved the way for a whole series of primetime animated shows from your studio.
The first review from Variety said it was a pen and ink disaster. Thank goodness the disaster lasted for over 6 weeks and is running as of today, as we speak.
It's Point of View on WNUA 95.5. Our guest is animator Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Studios. I'm Charlie Meyerson. Now, what role did you and Bill Hanna play as your studio developed these shows for TV? I mean, are you writing, are you directing, you're producing, all of it?
Yeah, it was a little unusual. The two of us were in the same room, and we, without deliberately doing it, we split the job. What I ended up doing was creating the characters, doing storyboards on them, doing material for presentation, and going out and selling it. When I did sell it, I would come back with the show and I would cast it for voices. I would supervise the storyboard and I would record it. Well, after I got through with that, we would turn it over to Bill. Bill would take it and time it, hand it out to the animators, check it for animation, check the music, write lyrics. So it worked fine. People say to me, "How come you've been working with Bill for 50 years and you never had any fights?" I always tell them, yes, we did have fights. The very first week we had a very bad fight, and we haven't spoken since.
What was that fight over?
Oh, I don't even remember. I remember Tex Avery was sitting in the room, and Bill said something that irritated me, and I yelled back at him. A couple of cuss words, you know, and that was it. That was the only time we ever had a fight.
It's Point of View, WNUA 95.5. I'm Charlie Myerson. Our guest is animator Joe Barbera. You mentioned Tex Avery, another legendary and
Yes,
now late
indeed.
figure in the animation industry. I want to hear more about your relationship with him, his influence on your style, or vice versa.
Well, it so happened, in the early days like that, up until not too long ago, there was great rivalry. The rivalry was between us and Warner Brothers, or Schlesinger as they call it, us and Disney, us and Walter Lantz, and that was the rivalry. Now, when in our studio, for instance, we had Tex Avery, who was his own man, charming, delightful man, very quiet, created stuff like Red Hot Riding Hood, which the studio was horrified. They said, we can't release this. This is bad taste. Now, they went on to win the Academy Award, and he was a charming, nice man. And he got fed up and quit, and then he came back later on, passed away, but I mean, wonderful guy.
And he worked for you under Hanna-Barbera Studios.
That's right.
And what features did he work on?
Well, he developed a character called Droopy.
Droopy Dog.
He had a little voice like that, you know. He would say, you know what, I'm happy. He looked so sad, you know. Then to the other side of the coin, he created a Red Hot Riding Hood. The swinging gal, red-headed gal, doing all kinds of moves and all that, and horrifying the executives. And it was nothing compared to what you see today, you know. But he was that kind of a guy. It was wonderful.
Point of View on WNUA 95.5. We're talking to animator Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Studios. Well, you know what? We have so much to talk about, including questions from listeners, that I think we're going to have to do something we haven't done before. We're going to have to split this show into two parts. So could you do me a favor? Can you just camp out here in the studio for 7 days? and we'll continue this next Sunday morning at 8:30, okay?
I'll be happy to do it.
The bathroom,
as long as Carol can hang it.
Carol, your assistant is here, and she's welcome too. The bathroom is down the hall on the right if you need it. You'll find some fresh towels under your seat.
Do you have any blankets?
I think we've got some blankets. Okay. I'll dig them up for you. Our guest on Point of View on WNUA 95.5 has been animator Joe Barbera. More next week. I guess we're going to have to get fresh sheets too for the bed. I'm Charlie Myerson. Thanks for listening.
Adios, amigos. They see you real soon.
This has been Point. Here's your host, Charlie Myerson.
Good morning. Our guest on this edition of Point of View is the same guest we had last week on Point of View. And he's been camped out here for the last week. He's been using bathroom down the hall and sleeping in the newsroom. And we're now ready to resume part 2 of our interview with legendary animator Joe Barbera, as in Hanna-Barbera. For those of you joining us late, Mr. Barbera, 86 years old, joined the industry 60 years ago. He has been instrumental in transforming it immeasurably in the years since he first became an animator back in the 30s. Welcome back to Point of View. Are the accommodations okay?
Oh, yeah.
Took good care of you?
I had the Flintstone outfit on, you know, the skin, bare feet.
The sleeping bag. And Hanna-Barbera is now part of a big media empire. I want to recap for our audience how that came to pass.
Well, starting at the beginning when suddenly our studio was closed at MGM and Bill and I found ourselves walking the street, started our own studio, began to win Academy Awards, and within 6 years we sold the studio to Taft Broadcasting. It was a good relationship. Something stupid about it was that we should never have given up the rights to all of our characters, but we don't look back. It was great until then Taft got into trouble, and they sold out to Great American. Great American got into trouble, and they sold out to Turner, Ted Turner. Then Ted Turner decided to sell the studio, and Warner's bought it. And so now we're part of Warner Studios. We're part of Warner Animation Department. One interesting thing is most of the people working at Warner used to work for me. And it's like a family getting together again, you know. But anyway, that is, in a nutshell, what happened quickly. It took a lot of concern and worries, you know.
And your role, and Bill Hanna's role day to day now is what with this combined operation?
Bill is upstairs in what we call the penthouse. And I always tell everybody that he comes in the morning on a hang glider, which of course he doesn't. And I'm downstairs, and what I'm involved in right now is helping, or let's say consulting on developing direct-to-video hour shows with our classic characters, like a direct-to-video Flintstone, direct-to-video Scooby, a Jetson, and our classic characters, which, as you know, are all involved in keeping the Cartoon Network going.
Well, listen, you know, we generate an awful lot of interest among our listeners with your visit here, and I want to take some time right off the bat to get to some of their questions. From a listener named Mike Gold, one of the things the merger of Hanna-Barbera Studios with Turner and then with Time Warner has done is led to creation of the Cartoon Network, drawing on your tremendous library of characters you've created over the years, including what I think a lot of people will call the breakout hit of the network, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, the talk show.
That's right.
Do you ever feel like they're taking one of your classic characters, a superhero, straight superhero character from the 60s, and basically making fun of him? Did that cause any problem for you, any static?
Well, a little bit, yeah, a little bit. But since I'm Sicilian, I will take care of that.
Well, no, seriously, how did that develop? And you know, did you raise any objections?
If you created something in the beginning, no matter what they do with it, it's going to bother you because you think you can do better yourself, and you think your advice is more important, and that you can straighten out. But look if anyone pays $325 million for a studio, they can do what they want with it. You know, I'm not going to complain. But they call on me to get into consulting and to sit in on story conferences and the whole bit.
Do you find yourself in conflict with younger animators or animators?
No, we get along fine. I just figure they'll grow up.
Do you when you critique someone's work? I mean, what are some of the common criticisms you give to the work of
Well, I don't really give them criticism, but I always recommend story. I always urge them to get the story right. That's the most important part of what they're doing. It's so easy to do funny bits and pieces, but what's the story? Because I think our stuff is holding up for 50 years, some of it, because of the story. Tom and Jerry's at least 50 years ago is still running today. Flintstones is over 35 years ago, and Yogi Bear. Of course, the big deal is that Yogi, Scooby, and Boo Boo arrived on Mars.
That's right.
You know?
Did you get anything out of that?
A lot of publicity.
Another listener, Rich Tolman, wants to know some of those early characters, some of those early series in particular, some of the ethnic cartoon characters your studio created. Quick Draw McGraw's sidekick, Babaloo.
Babaloo.
Have you taken any, had any regrets, or anyone come to you over the years and said, these are ethnic and racial stereotypes?
I think we were very careful about taste. Babaloo was, hey, Quick Straw, he was, and Quick Draw would say, hold on there, Babaloo. He says, I do the thinning around here, because the other guy would say, hey, Quick Straw, I thin. And but we never got any problems with it.
Never complaints. And those cartoons are still showing.
That's right.
I mean, has there been any politically correct editing going on as some of these older cartoons air on the Cartoon Network?
Not that I know of.
All right. You're now reunited basically with Tom and Jerry. All these studio merger.
Sure.
Was that a joy on your part?
Oh yeah. I mean, Tom and Jerry are fabulous characters.
Which, for those of you again joining us late, Mr. Hanna and Miss Barbera created MGM.
That's right. We created all of them, but I have no favorite, because how can I get a favorite between Tom and Jerry, Flintstone, Yogi Bear, and Scooby-Doo? I mean, what am I going to do? I can't separate those guys.
So you don't have one favorite character in the entire history?
3, 4, 5 of them, yes.
Well, okay, who are the top 3, 4, or 5?
Well, Flintstones, Tom and Jerry, Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Scooby-Doo. Then we have Snagglepuss, who I love. and Magilla Gorilla. I mean, it's pretty hard to separate it. Augie Doggy, Doggy Daddy, and it goes right on down the list.
Point of View on WNUA 95.5. Charlie Myers, and here our guest is animator Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Studios, responsible for all of these and more.
Get set, get ready. Here comes Rough and Ready.
Huckleberry, how?
Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear. Yippee-yi-yo, hey-yi-yi, elephant all the way. Here comes Big Rob and Rob. Meet the big stone.
A gorilla like Magilla is mighty nice. Gorilla, Magilla, gorilla for sale.
Going through a lot of childhood memorabilia before we had this interview, I came across a lot of the old golden records based on the soundtracks of your TV shows and books and things like that. And of course, the one unifying theme is that Hanna and Barbera, those names always appeared at the top.
That's right.
Did that cause any problem, creative tension within the organization as it developed? That you guys are getting all the credit, and you've got voice artists and writers and individual animators working with you?
Well, we didn't have any trouble because they had a lot of respect for us. They figured that we knew what we were doing, and obviously the net results showed that we did know what we were doing, so we had respect. If we were turning out bad shows, we would have had a small revolution going on.
You've worked with some of the most talented voice artists, of course, in animation history. Tell us about some of them.
Well, to give you an example, one of my best guys was called Alan Reed, who was very famous from New York.
Fred Flintstone.
He ended up doing Fred Flintstone.
Oh, knock it off, Barney, will you? I just dropped my bowling ball on my big toe. Some sense of humor you got, knucklehead.
Mel Blanc, who was a legend.
No, Jackson, don't move. I'd like to remember you just as you are. Fired!
One of the nicest things Mel ever said about me, if you would like to hear it.
Yes.
We were having a big lunch with about 30 of the voice people, and he never said anything, very quiet. And he walked with a cane because of his auto accident, and he hit the glasses, and everybody stopped talking. He got up and he said, I've known Joe Barbera for 30 years, and I've never heard anyone say one bad thing about him. Now, that's a pretty nice compliment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I said to myself, that's the nicest thing you ever said, Mel. And it was. But we had Dawes Butler, we had Don Messick. Besides the characters that we did, at one time we were approached to do this famous book called Charlotte's Web.
By E.B. White.
And the gentleman that brought it in was Edgar Bronfman, whose son now runs Universal, and he runs Seagram. But he had the property. So he came in, and we talked, and he decided to do the picture with us. So I did a lot of development on characters. I get a phone call and says, you know something? He said, we have to go up to Bar Harbor and show this to E.B. White. So I flew into New York, and then they got a helicopter out of 59th Street and flew into Westchester. Then we got into a jet and flew up to Bar Harbor. Then we got into a Mercedes and drove to E.B. White. And we met the gentleman, and I showed him artwork, and he showed me he gave me a marvelous edition in which he edited it in 3 colored inks, what to keep, what to eliminate, and what not to use. Wonderful man, and we came out with a picture which is a classic today. And I would get a call from Debbie Reynolds who said, I want to do the voice of Charlotte, and I'll do it free.
Do you realize that if I didn't eat them, bugs would get so numerous they'd destroy the earth? Spiders are really very useful creatures.
And then we had Agnes Moorehead came in and did another voice. And we had another marvelous guy did the rat. You would remember, he talked like he says, what's in it for me?
Paul Lind.
That's the man. Hey,
Paul
you're
Lind.
very good.
Well, I've
That's
seen
the
that.
man.
Good thing for you I saved that egg, Charlotte.
He did
It
that
certainly
voice.
is, and I'm grateful to you.
And of course, you did a great imitation. Now you do all these imitations, but
I do when I direct.
You don't do the voices on
No,
screen. Have you done any voices on screen?
No. I direct the shows, and in doing, I will give them an imitation of what I want. That's about it.
Are you still directing anything on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
Well, whenever it fits, and it's something that I did. I used to direct every single night of the week. a different show.
Point of View on WNUA 95.5. Our guest is animator Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Studios. Another question from a listener, Felicia Curtis. Any tips on preparation or application for jobs as animation artist? Someone wants to break into the business. Is it getting easier?
Well, I'm not too familiar with that. All I know is that in our particular case, we're in the process of merging and getting together, and they're not hiring anybody that I know except for whatever production we're doing. They will hire an animator, they'll hire an artist, but they don't have any interns right now that I know. But we intend to get them.
Yeah.
So just send in a letter and say what you want to do.
And of course, you have to go out west. I mean, there isn't a lot of animation going on outside of California at this point.
Well, there's quite a few studios around the country now. They're not all in California, but those are mostly commercial studios.
You recommend for someone who would aspire to be in this business professional training, art school, college?
Well, I would recommend that if you go into school and they have those classes, take them. Don't let them go. I mean, take all the classes you can and go to as much art school as you can. And then show up with a portfolio of artwork under your arm and maybe voice tracks.
Another question from a listener named Pamela Ferris. And you mentioned this briefly last week, but new animated movies coming out? Or features featuring some of your classic
our
characters?
Studio?
Yeah, your studio. Flintstones or Jetsons in particular she wants to know about.
Well, we are planning direct-to-video projects. And th're 1 hour long. And they will be Flintstones, Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, Yogi Bear. And I think that's the future of a lot of stuff.
Direct-to-video first, not to the theaters, not even to broadcast or cable television
first. Not
first.
or anything. In fact, the motion picture studios are doing that now.
And why is that? Well, why have the economics changed?
Well, you don't have to gamble. I mean, you don't have to wait for business to come in. I mean, you sell them before the whole... You have no problem.
Point of View on WNUA 95.5. Joe Barbera is here, the Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Animation Studios. More questions from listeners. What do you think about social pressure on cartoon producers over the years? It's come and gone, but the monitoring of violence and now educational content.
Yeah.
Has that handcuffed you? Has it improved the industry or the presentations?
The educational pressure has been going on for 20 years, and at least that, and I've been involved in all of it. And the danger is that once a child senses that you're trying to educate them on television, they turn off. I mean, they're very sharp today. The minute they think you're trying to teach them something. See, the way I look at it is these children go to school every day, supposedly. So why on a Saturday do we have to keep teaching them? I mean, Saturday should be entertainment and not teaching. That's my personal feeling. The government apparently thinks differently. Everybody has to turn out 3 hours of education a day or something like that. So this has been going on and it will continue to go on. So I don't know whether it's going to work. Do you think your children are learning from television?
Depends. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not.
So it's up in the air.
Another question. With most animation work now being, or a lot of it now being done out of the country, do you see a trend of it coming back to the U.S.? I mean, you've mentioned that you're closing down some operations in the merged MGM, Turner, Hanna-Barbera operation.
Well, so far it's all going out of the country because of cost. It's very hard to get any animation done in the United States because of the price. So in Europe and Korea and Japan and Australia, and we had studios in all of those places at one time, this is where you're able to keep within your budget. It's simply a budget project.
What about computers?
Well, computers, we've been into computers. We were in it 10 years, put in $10 million, and then quit it. Mainly because the equipment is coming out so fast, new things, every week. Now, you put in $1 million worth of equipment, let's say, and 3 weeks later you go up and you say, what's going on? They say, the computer is down. What the heck does that mean? So you wait another 3 weeks. How's it going? Computer is down again. Oh, I'll tell you what we do. We'll buy some new equipment. It's smaller, it's faster, it's another $1 million. This goes on all the time. It's going on today. You cannot keep up with the way it's moving.
So these new features that you're doing, are you using computers? You're not using computers?
Well, the way you use computers, in my opinion, which they can ignore, is when you need something in your feature you're working on that should have a computer, you go to a computer house. and you work with them and you do it. You don't have to set up your own whole computer department on it because you don't have that much call for it. So that's how you handle your computers today.
You got features like Toy Story and others forthcoming from Pixar that are totally computer generated, not a human hand to be seen. I mean, what do you think about that kind of animation? Is it eventually going to make extinct the sort of hand-drawn animation that you started with?
The people doing it keep preaching the demise of animation, but it's not going to happen. I think there's a place for that kind of animation, and if you like it, you enjoy it. If you don't like it, you don't have to worry about it. But computer animation is not going to replace animation totally. It's just going to work together. That's the way to do it.
What do you think about a lot of the work being done in other countries now for other forms of animation, Japanese anime, for instance? Do you see any of that? And how does it compare to American stuff?
We've been involved in that a long time. But if you want a lot of action and a lot of detail work and a lot of meticulous work and a lot of effects work, you send them over to Japan, Korea. And they have 1,000 artists waiting to do it. And that's how you do it.
Point of View on WNUA 95.5. Charlie Meyerson here. Our guest is animator Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera Studios. You have any regrets creatively about your career? Projects you've undertaken that you haven't finished or that didn't come out the way you wanted them to, or I mean, other decisions you've made that you wish you could have over again?
My regrets are personal, and they're not so much involved with the studio, because I'm a frustrated, if you want to call it that, playwright. I have written 2 plays. I've had them both optioned for Broadway, and I'm on a third. So that's another bit of frustration or desire. Or I happen to think that if you ever write a play and it hits Broadway, that's going to be the height of achievement as far as I'm concerned. And I've done it twice. I intend to continue to do it. That's that. As far as animation goes, I think I would like to tackle another feature, being aware of the fact that Disney has got that market cornered. Because after you make a feature over there, you'll spend another 40 or 50 million promoting it. And very few studios have that kind of money. But that's another thing I'd like to do.
You think it'll happen?
Oh, yeah. No problem. I'm working on one right now.
Can you tell us about it?
No.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Well, I think the greatest achievement that we have is spread out. 7 Oscars and 8 Emmys. I mean, now, what more can we ask for? And innumerable plaques and nominations. And for instance, one of the things that people don't know too much about the studio is our Bible series. That's something that took me 17 years to get off the ground. Every year I would go into sell shows, and I'd always come up with the Bible. Pretty soon, the network people, Silverman and Eisner and Bud Grant, would be saying, "Oh, God, are you back again with the Bible?" And I said, "Listen, you want action? Do you want a whole cavalry to be drowned in the sea? Do you want the walls of Jericho to come tumbling down? Do you want somebody to be thrown into a lion's den? Do you want brother killing brother? What do you want? You got it all in the Bible." Oh, get out of here, you know what I mean? Eventually, our CEO back in Cincinnati said, "Let's do it." And it's now one of our best-selling items. I mean,
and it's generally sold directly. I mean, I've seen the ads on TV and in magazines.
That's right. It went into video, and it's a beautifully done project. And I added touches. Without touching one word of the Bible, I added touches. Like, I have one, Noah's Ark. Now, I say to the writer, I said, it's 700 feet long. It's made by hand by Noah and his son. I said, it's got to leak. Why don't we show anything on that, you know? Also, it has to pitch. And as it does that, the animals slide from one side to the other. Well, the kids love it. The kids go crazy over that. They say, play it again, you know? So that's how I handle the Bible stories, and they're doing great.
Would it pass network censorship? What with all that violence and sex?
What violence?
The Bible.
The Bible. Cecil B. DeMille didn't have any trouble.
You know, looking at the body of Hanna-Barbera work over the years, it seems to me, and you know, one of our listeners mentioned this too in an email, that the stuff that was targeted for adults, Flintstones, Jetsons,
Yeah.
seems to have had the greatest impact. Now, is that because it was on in prime time, or because it was pitched for adults? What do you think?
Well, let's get back on it. We did Tom and Jerry, right, for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
That was never made for children. The cartoons were made, number one, for entertainment, and number two, to run in the theaters at nighttime. We never had any problem with it. We never lost a child. They love them today. So that's the way I always work. We're aiming for the family. We're not going to aim for the kids, and we never play down to kids. There are no such kids anymore. At 3 years old, they're smarter than the average bear, I'll tell you that. You know.
Any closing thoughts, parting shots for our audience?
Well, if you want to be in the animation business, go to art school, see as many cartoons as you can, and make up your own animation at night when you're sitting home. Get an animation board and practice, and then go to a studio with your animation and with your soundtracks or anything. That's how to get into it.
Our guest on Point of View on WNUA 95.5 has been animator Joe Barbera. Such an honor to meet you. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks for your great body of work that's delighted so many of us over the years.
Sir, the honor is mine to invite me here, because I could keep going for 2 more hours. You know.
All right, well, the bathroom's down the hall on the left. You can camp out.
We'll stay another week.
I just want to take time out to tell our audience that if you're interested in more on the history of television animation and